you this morning. Thank you. We are delighted to have you all this morning as we continue our training session, as we in open learning get ready to gear up towards summer 2027, where we are actually going to be, hopefully, by the grace of God, pushing out online degree programs that are accessible for all students. But beyond creating an accessible online learning program as well as online learning degrees, we also want to support the spirit of building accessibility campus wide. And so, with that in mind, we have taken the time to invite into our space a gentleman who is an amazing professional, an educator, and I will take this time to introduce him. But before I get there, I just want to say I met him at a conference that I attended most recently in 2025. Is like just yesterday, right? In 2025, at the M Enabling Conference, I met him. I saw what was going on, and I said, you know what, this is amazing. I have to bring this back to the Bahamas. Now, while I can't pay for everybody's ticket to jump on Bahamas Air to fly in, I had to figure out the next best way to do it. And this was that. And so please allow me to introduce to you Dr. Christopher Lee, PhD. He is an international accessibility expert and the author of 3 books, including Faking It, A Look into the Mind of a Creative Learner, published by Boynton Cook Henman. He is a sought-after public speaker on disabilities, ICTs, and assistive technologies. Dr. Christopher Lee founded and directed North America's largest higher education accommodation service and research center, impacting thousands of universities. He has been the principal investigator on several research grants, including the first in the world Obama Fund for the Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. Currently, Dr. Christopher Lee serves as the president of G3ICT, the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information and Communication Technologies, and managing director of IAAP. He is also a passionate advocate for cognitive disabilities, having acted as executive director of the Georgia Learning Disability Adult Association for 8 years and participated on multiple boards in the field. His current company name and designation is Christopher M. Lee, PhD, President, G3ICT, Managing Director, and IAAP. Without further delay, please join me with your virtual hands in welcoming our final keynote speaker, special invited guest for our training session this week, Dr. Christopher Lee. And he does have the floor to present. You should have sharing capabilities. So we want to, let's give him a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Chanel, thank you very much for the introduction. I am really sad that I can't be there. I am freaking bummed. I was so excited when you came up to the conference and we hung out for a little bit in DC, and I was like, oh, in the Bahamas, in January, I can do that. But anyway, I wish I was there. Maybe one day I can get there. Y'all doing some amazing things. I had the opportunity to talk to Chanel about some of the work that's happening right there, and it's particularly around inclusive technologies and showing that people with disabilities on the campus, as well as off the campus that may be coming on the campus, are actually engaging in. So I'm really happy to be here. And do you see my screen? Does everyone see?
Yes, sir. It's not in presentation mode, but it's in edit mode, but we can see it.
Great. If it's okay, I'll keep it in edit mode because I'm going to be jumping.
Okay. no problem. Yes.
Make it larger. Um, so again, as Shanda mentioned, my name is Christopher Lee. I'm very passionate about this topic. I will say I've been in it all my life because, to give you a little background, I was diagnosed with learning disabilities in the second grade, which impacted and does impact my auditory and my visual processing, which basically means that I can't fully trust everything I hear the way and fully what I see in writing. So I have to be real cautious, and I have to have specific technology that helps me support my learning disability. It impacts reading, impacts writing, impacts my speech. I slightly have a speech impediment that makes me sound like I'm from the north, or sometimes I get Australia, and sometimes I get Louisiana. I actually was born and raised in Florida in the U.S. And so, in the concept of really what I have done in my life up to this time, which now brought into the bio, was really something driven because of my learning disability at first. I was an athlete. I swam in high school, which allowed me to frankly get into college at a time that were more flexible at getting in. My SAT scores, my ACT scores weren't very high. Grade point average was mediocre, but I was a great swimmer. So I got lucky. And I had a really supportive family, which a lot of kids do and a lot of kids don't in regards to supporting them around their disability. My father struggled with it. He didn't want to, have me share anything about, a weakness, and so that was something I kind of grew up with, and I kind of hid it and faked it a lot, which is the title of my first book that came out in the 90s. It's been a long time. So that's a little background on me. I did want to tell you why I got into this field a little bit, just kind of drill down on that because it really does translate into what we have to talk about today, and that's campus-wide accessibility. Campus is much like a city. It's got a lot of moving parts, as y'all know. And ensuring that the campus is fully accessible, not only from an environmental standpoint, but from a digital standpoint, which what y'all were just talking about around STEM related topics. I'm going to slow down. I'm sorry I talk fast. The is so important, and there's a lot of moving pieces with this, and we've done a lot of work around this. My start in this area was somewhat accidental. I graduated with my undergraduate degree from the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, and then went on to my master's and my PhD over a period of time. What I found out was that when I was doing my undergraduate work, if I had my books read to me, and back then in the 80s, we had volunteers that basically sat down and read the textbooks, if you could believe that. And we used 4-track tape recorders. And those tape recorders, we were able to navigate through those very painfully to get access to my content. So for other textbooks. So what I'm saying to you is that back in the 80s and even 90s and early 2000s, that was still a challenge. And it still is a challenge today, too, for individuals with disabilities, whether they're visually impaired, they have blindness, or the cognitive disabilities or other impairments. Because of this situation, when I went back to my graduate work, I realized that publishers like Wiley and like all the other ones out there still want up to queue about making textbooks accessible, meaning that they can be read with assistive technology and navigated. And so, with a mentor and support from the University of Georgia, we petitioned the university system of Georgia to put money aside to start a accommodation center, which ended up being a research center. It was a model that we put together, which was actually brilliant. I look back on it, I didn't know it then, that allowed us to go to vendors like assistive technology vendors, it allowed us to go to publishers and to say, we have more clout because we're representing the university system of Georgia. And from that, as was mentioned in my bio, we set up a membership platform that allowed universities like the university you're at to become members Well, we basically acted at the very beginning as a manufacturing company. Well, we bought textbooks if we couldn't get them from the publisher. We had guillotines, we cut them, we scanned them, and we used OCR on them, and we converted them into accessible format. And we built a huge repository of textbooks, and we started relationships with publishers so that we could get those files faster, not that they were fully accessible by any means, and then start a repository of those with permission from the publisher tying it to the individual student that needed it linked to the faculty. And that program was called Access Text. It was a program that was around for a while. It ended up just closing the door about 3 years ago. So this accommodation center gave us an idea and gave me an idea and others in my profession of how we could actually make a campus accessible more. So not only were we working with the University of Georgia, which eventually the program transferred to Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Georgia, we were looking at incorporating that throughout the campus, and then we were doing for other campuses. Since then, we've done a lot more work to actually look at the aspects of maturity of a campus and the accessibility, which I'm going to talk about. So that's a little bit of my background and why I'm so passionate about that. I left academia about 8 years ago to run a nonprofit called G3 ICT, which is the global initiative for inclusive information communication technology. It is a mouthful, and it wasn't branded really well. I had nothing to do with that, but it is an amazing organization. It's a small, lean nonprofit housed out of Atlanta, Georgia, but we have team members all over the globe, and I'll share a little bit about that with you. My goal today is to give you kind of who we are and what we're about, because it does tie into that campus-wide accessibility, but then talk a little bit about some of the opportunities of membership with our organization and how it sets up a framework to allow a campus to relatively quickly train, upscale staff on the campus and get certified, as well as have professional education tied to it and be part of a larger network of universities that are part of a membership model. So I'll be talking to you about that. I'm also going to be talking to you about two of the profiles that we have with Princeton University as well as with Georgia Tech, and how they've been utilizing this model to ensure that a campus-wide accessibility, more for the digital side of things, can be done. So I'll be sharing with that. I want to keep this really informal. We have 45 minutes. Feel free to put questions in the chat, raise your hand. I'll do my best to see it. But let's make this interactive, like Chanel was saying. So if that's good, I'll just hit on again. Let me know if you have trouble seeing these. I'm going to be jumping a little bit, but the slides, that is. A little bit about G3 ICT and its kind of mission. It is a global accessibility community that focuses on the rights of persons with disabilities. And it came out of the UN when the Convention on the Rights with Persons with Disabilities, which is the first human rights treaty, came to be in 2006. There were sister programs set up to actually help implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that has goals tied to it for countries to meet certain accessibility guidelines and standards by 2030. That has shifted slightly, and they've expanded that date. But we are a nonprofit. We are focusing on the fundamental rights of human beings. We did launch in 2006. We are an organization that really touches, as you will see, every sector and every industry, except for higher education, particularly, is a large part of our membership base. Some of the work that we do that really allows us to keep the pulse of what's going on in higher education, but other industries and sectors, is we have something called the Dale Resource Guide and the Dale Index. This is a very involved survey and guide that advocacy groups around the globe, 100 and I think 50 countries is what we're pushing for this version. I think we had 137 countries that would fill out this survey to give us an idea of how the country is implementing accessibility, not only in education, but in government and in other areas. So this survey data that we get allows us to rank, in a sense, do a report card on how countries are doing with linking to the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So it's the only report card out there in a sense. The UN uses it quite a bit to monitor how digital accessibility is happening within these countries, which really tie right down to academia. It doesn't touch so much the K-12 arena, but more a little bit in the higher education we get information on. The other area that we do a lot of work on, which is really what I believe the bleeding is regarding campus-wide accessibility, is the area of is the area of procurement. If you don't procure the right, hardware and software that's accessible, the bleeding is going to continue. So working with your procurement entities at the university is extremely critical. And one of the things that we have done with G3ICT, as well as there are a lot of other organizations that have done this, is we have developed through funding from Microsoft a maturity model, that allows us to look at the gaps or the weakness areas of an organization, of a city, of a university. So these maturity models are tweaked to each one. So it gives us that pulse that I was talking about of understanding where the primary issues are. With maturity models, which I won't talk too much about today, but we have done many maturity models with different universities, and always procurement seems to be the challenging place. So if you were to put any kind of pinpoint one area on the university to look at first, is definitely in procurement and setting up guidelines and principles on ensuring that any products and services that are purchased are accessible, and that's not easy to do, especially with learning management systems, with registration systems. It's a challenge. However, there's models that are out there. And the model that I like to point to most is the California State University model, CSU. Their model is quite impressive. I think it's 24 universities over the span of under their umbrella, where the California Community College has a larger, more expansive, over 100 community college. They kind of use a similar model where they work with the vendor and they do accessibility testing with the software in real time, with university officials, with procurement at the table, with the disability entity at the university at the table, and others, IT, and even sometimes compliance and legal. Well, they also show someone with a disability that's actually using the software, and very quickly the vendor's like, "Oh, I've got this. We can fix it, or we can't." So there's a lot of models out there that are just pretty phenomenal to help this inclusive campus-wide accessibility that good practices around. So procurement is important. Maturity models, understanding where the weaknesses are, where the strengths are on your campus is very important. And we do these maturity models in a way that brings in different groups, different leaders within the university, and we have discussions with them. So not only are we collecting quantitative data from these maturity models, we're also getting the qualitative data too, that allows us to build kind of a report that provides a snapshot. Now, after you get this snapshot, the real work really happens. And another product that we have developed with a steering committee of disability advocacy groups that owns the right to change this framework is something called the Business Accessibility Criteria Program. So it goes hand in hand with our maturity model. The goal is it's a list of about 250 questions that are broken up to 14 different topics, procurement being one of those, AI being another topic, HR being another topic. Well, questions are asked that tie back to that maturity model. And again, you can go a little deeper to go, wow, we don't do this or we do this. And it helps with kind of that implementation phase of ensuring the campus is fully accessible. So again, we have a lot of different tools, and the business accessibility criteria goes hand in hand with the maturity model work that we do. I haven't gotten to the membership piece yet, so there's a lot I'm throwing at y'all. I apologize, but there's a lot of good stuff. Can't help it. This is just a sample. It says China at the top here. A sample of the report card I mentioned for the Dale Index and the different ratings of that and the different countries that have participated. This is a powerful tool to get governments to change how they're doing things. Last year, the primary, I'm sorry, 2 years ago, the primary actually it's farther from that. I'm looking at 2020 right now. 2020 snapshot was Qatar was number one. They're a very wealthy country. They've got a lot of resources. They're small. So we factor that into the results too. But we learn a lot from this particular one. This is all on our website, where you can drill down and look at how countries are kind of dealing things. And around digital content is something that's very important to look at, and how countries are working with, particularly education is working with publishers and so on. There's spackling of information in there for that. So I did want to bring that up as a resource. So I want to get a little bit into the meat of this, and this is setting up a framework in a sense to make impact on your campus pretty quickly. And we've worked really hard being G3 ICT and a division of us, which is IAAP, the International, Association of Accessibility Professionals. And I want to tell you a little bit about that because it's a division that came underneath us in 2016. And the framework is, I mean, it does a pretty good job with universities. It's not perfect by any means. We've got a long way to go, but we have a model that helps inspire a university very quickly with their staff about being more inclusive. The overall framework is for every sector and every industry. So we touch, as a small organization, we touch a lot of folks, and it is members. We have individual members as well as organizational members. And the organizational members have a roster. So a university would have a roster of employees. And based on the level that they are at, the number of employees can go get access to the services. And we sometimes work with different cohorts or ambassadors of universities or companies. We have large companies like Apple, that's part of us, Amazon. How IAAP got started, just to give you a real good clue of what was going on in the industry back in 2014, was that companies, particularly the IT sector, that universities work quite a bit, like Microsoft and so on, they were trying to hire people that had accessibility, specifically digital accessibility knowledge, and they couldn't find them. And when they did hire people, they were being disappointed. So a group of about 30 organizations, mostly IT, but also finance, banks like Barclays and Wells Fargo and so on, and advocacy groups came together and said, hey, we need to do something about this. So about 2 years of focus groups and research, what fizzled up to the top was an association. Let's develop an association, and let's make this association focused on three primary pillars. The first pillar being education. Let's make sure that we have offerings as this association that organizations can learn from. The second is professional certifications, not certificates, but professional certifications, which they get confused all the time. So this is a professional certification association. And then the third is networking, and that is a community that is united around accessibility that can learn from each other. So those are the three pillars that make the model, we believe, on campus is more accessible and being more inclusive to the faculty, to the staff, to the students, to the alumni that comes in, the alumni that come on campus. So that's a little bit about how kind of that came up. The IWP came from being. Um, I've already mentioned the membership types, and there are some benefits that are tied to that that can be picked, pick and chosen based on what the university, what the organization needs. Um, so the footprint of IWP as a global entity has grown. We have right now over 10,000 members, and these are members, individuals, as well as organizations with their employees tied to them, as well as 10,000 certification holders. And I'll go through the certifications in just a little bit. We feel because I'm sorry, can y'all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Um, your I can still see your screen. It's
Okay.
just that your video just okay, you're back now.
Literally, the power just went out here.
Oh, okay, right. Okay, I got you.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. Hopefully, we're okay. I heard something pop.
That's
Uh,
quick. In the Bahamas, it'll be a whole different experience, but
um, so anyway, so the framework, provides all these different benefits that are chosen as well as that with that. Our global footprint is all over. As I mentioned, we have the 10,000. We're in 110 countries right now. About 30% of our membership is higher education, so it's a large amount. When I came over from Georgia Tech to G3 ICT, that's a lot of universities came because I was pushing a model that they needed, I believe. So we are slowly building that footprint throughout. There's challenges with different cultures, as y'all know. There's challenges in translations. There's challenges in customer service from an association standpoint. So we try to do the best we can, but we always rely on the folks that are on the ground in the region in which the membership is located. Um, so the idea of how we grow the actual chapters or affiliates is around pulling together small advisory committees um, that have knowledge of the region, that can provide information to us to help us make our benefits better. And so we definitely bring in thought leaders. We focus on the certification and knowledge that is needed for that region. We've been working a lot right now in Africa and India. There's some challenging areas of how to distribute certifications and education opportunities there. But we continue to work with local people on the ground. We believe that's so important, and we're just kind of the footprint that starts here, but we expand out and make sure we have those support. We have community building, and we also follow, obviously the trends and legislation, and that's how we've kind of moved forward. So the members that we have, or if they're in the region, they're attached to a chapter, is how we do it. So we don't have a lot of chapters. We have around five chapters. We have two strategic partners, and then we are working right now in Canada as well, in France, to build chapters there. So we're expanding it more and more, and we learn every time we bring that into a mix. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about the actual benefits that we offer. And and we believe that again, like I said, that these help build that inclusive campus-wide inclusion program. And one of them is that we work with the members very very closely, and we do webinars. So we do a call for webinars in the built environment area, as well as a call for webinars in the digital accessibility areas. And the topics range, pretty much all over the place. It could be digital content, it could be procurement, it could be accommodations that we work with. But we have a team of volunteers. One of the best parts of working with this association is the amount of volunteers that support the organization. We couldn't do it without them. They actually vet these webinars, which we're very proud of. They actually vet them to make sure that the speakers and that the quality of the content is going to be strong for our members. So we worked really hard on that. We also have webinars that are packages on specific topics. We're working on one right now on UX and having a 6-part webinar series on just UX, not just campus-wise, but in general for all organizations. And so we spent a lot of webinars, and that webinar has a repository. That webinar library has a repository of hundreds and hundreds of webinars that are vetted, as well as we go through and get rid of them after 3 years or so if they're not relative anymore. All of these webinars are developed by subject matter experts. So they ideally, we like for them to actually have their certification from us. That's not always the case, but we do prefer that. We also have mini series that we put on, and we also have developed courses, and we're leaning into the professional education much more in 2026. Originally, when the organization was set up, it was set up that we would use external vendors to do educational, or universities to help us do educational, because that's not an area of our expertise, but we've had to hire people to fill in the gaps, because we've noticed that a lot of the certifications that we offer, parts of the domains within those certifications, like procurement, let's use that as an example. There's just not a lot of training. There may be a lot of information out there that you can gather from the web, but there's not any constructive, formalized educational training that's tied, that you can get easily, that's tied to the certifications. So we've become more involved in professional education in that way. We also, have focused courses, in areas such as accessibility development. Social media is an area that we've really driven down into, digital accessibility and accessibility design. What we have noticed is that, not everyone wants to get a certification, a professional certifications, because tied with the certifications, is the credits that you have to maintain over, in our case, a 3-year period. So many credits have to be maintained. And a lot of people just don't want to deal with that. A lot of people move jobs. A lot of people retire. A lot of different reasons why they may or may not get a certification. So these courses now, have knowledge badges, which I'll share in just a second, that are tied to them. The certifications, I'm super proud of, and I tell you why. I'm proud of them because it's not my team sitting around writing questions to develop these certifications. There is a very extensive process, and I'm sure some of you on this call knows and dealt with professional certifications. So I'm probably speaking to the choir here, a lot of you. But for the ones that you don't, it's volunteers, subject matter volunteers that come around a table to develop a body of knowledge. And that body of knowledge lists out the domains of that certification. In this case, from a web accessibility certification for developers, what do developers need to know in regards to accessibility, and what all those domains. And after that body of knowledge is completed, a job task analysis is sent out to experts. And ideally, we have to receive so many feedback, so many responses to say that we're on track with the job task, which tied to the domains. So after that, then we have to write another outline, and then develop the questions, which have to be maintained and be relative culturally and translated culturally based on the countries we do. So it's a big undertaking to develop these certifications. But I'm so proud that that these are done by volunteers, subject matter expert volunteers. We may pay somebody to help massage the body of knowledge, or to translate the body of knowledge for a certification. But we don't, we rely on the community to actually develop these certifications. The CPAC certification is which is a certified professional in accessibility core competencies. Very long name, not good for cognitive disabilities. But it's what I inherited, so we're not changing it. It's a broad certification. Um, the qualifications for taking the certifications is that you've worked with people with disabilities. It could be students in your class. It could be working with the disability service office at the university. It could be working with your IT folks. What you're doing here is a good example of that. And you basically put an application to become a candidate to take this exam. It's 75 questions. It's about to go up to 100 questions. And it's around very specific domains. Some of them may be disabilities. What are disabilities? What are accommodations? What is UX? Um, what are some of the laws and standards? Because every one of these certifications are global. It's not just the U.S. laws that we tout, even though we've been criticized of being too much in that area. We fixed it and worked on it. But this certification is a very broad certification. And it's something that most anybody can take if they've had some experience in working with disabilities in that area. And if not, they can study for it. There's a course that we offer. It is actually developed by Princeton Universities. And Princeton University came in, and I will share the profile in a few minutes of what they're doing on their campus. But they wrote a course for CPAC for their faculty and staff. And we have taken that, we've gotten the rights to use it and put it in our LMS system. And there's a questions, sample questions that are tied to it, not as hard as the actual exam, actually. The passing rate for the CPAC is about 68 to 70%, which is pretty good. We revamp it every 2 years. So that's pretty much the CPAC. And then we have two technical, and I'm putting my hand down from me. So they're vertical, not so much horizontal. They're much more technical driven. So the pre-qualification is to take the WAS exam, which is the web accessibility exam. And then we have a accessible document certification, and that's ADS. So it's accessible document specialist. And then we have the web accessibility specialist. Both of those, you need not only the knowledge, but you need the hands-on skill of working in the development field for the web accessibility certification for 3 to 5 years across different domains. So and the same thing with the document accessibility specialist, you have to be touching documents on a regular time to ensure that they're accessible to qualify to become a candidate to take the exam. And after the exams are done, you receive your badge. It's a digital badge from Credly that has metadata tied to it that allows us to track for 3 years different information, and provides us to make sure that you're doing your credits, which are between 35 to 45 hours of credits over a 3-year period. Not horrible. A lot of our benefits allow you to use those benefits to actually take those credits. But it could be at this conference is a good example of what you're doing here. You would use that as your credits. You would submit that through our certification portal. We also have what we believe is something that's important is the CPAC and the technical knowledge of the WAS. So that's the CPWA, which is where you have taken both of those certifications and have passed them, and you have that designee now. So what's been interesting about the certification, as I mentioned, with 10,000 now, not everyone keeps up those certifications. It's a lot of work in some cases, but the churn rate's not as it's on average with most associations. But what's been interesting is that people are starting to use the certifications for career advancements. And what's really been exciting for me to see, even though we don't have really good data around this yet, we're tracking it, but it's not clean, is how many companies are starting to put the certification as a qualifier in their job descriptions when they're posting jobs. We're seeing more and more companies, particularly consultancies and IT companies and some universities, do that. That means that we're starting to see our first certification being CPAC came out in only 2016. So we're very young in the certification world. And so now we're starting to see companies say, hey, this has traction. We've been around, and we want to make sure we hire somebody who is certified, and we know they have some level of understanding accessibility from a floor standpoint. So it's great. The other thing that's really cool that kind of surprised me, maybe I shouldn't have when I joined G3ICT, was the number of subject matter experts, particularly consultants out there that have the certification and really don't need the certification. I mean, they've got the expertise. They've been in the field for years. They are experts. Um, and 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 what I've found as I've talked to them is the fact that they're supporting the community. So it's that third pillar I talked about earlier. It's that networking, it's that community. But I want to make sure that the younger people coming up behind me are getting certified. I want to spread this out. So it's been beautiful, and the of some of the feedback that I've gotten. One of the subject matter experts I talked to not too long ago is a subject matter expert for legal cases. So when he's up on stand, he's a CPWA, so he has both. When he's on stand, he basically says, when they ask him what makes you qualified to be standing up here and saying, what you're saying about the lack of accessibility with this company or university, he said, well, I'm a CPWA, and this is the only profession out there that offers this professional certification. So it's been really really nice to watch happen. We, we've started to really collect information from certification holders of why they take the certification. Just a couple of these I'll read over. Professional certificates helps me discover points of views of knowledge we would hardly have access to otherwise. Um, the accessibility certifications are a good thing for society. They provide they provide a uniform, transparent proof of concrete skills and so on. So we're seeing just a huge movement, and particularly in Europe right now with the EAA, the European Accessibility Act, which came into legislation was launched in of June of 28th of this year. Companies are being mandated to be more accessible. So I mean, just for students graduating from universities right now that are interested in accessibility, or areas that could impact accessibility, this is just we're seeing that this is happening. In the U.S., we have a lot of legislation, some of it not with teeth, that forces mandates, but some of it does have some teeth. So it's an interesting time that we're in. I've already mentioned a little bit about the courses, and I want to leave some time for questions, but these are the ones that we really have found that our members are interested from a digital accessibility standpoint. We have a course that is on built environment, which is very beneficial for campuses. And it was developed originally from a nonprofit out of Canada that was one of those sister programs like we were out of the UN back in 2006. And this is a great course. And we even had a certification that was tied to it on built environment, but we've paused that certification because we're trying to revamp the program a little bit, but the course is strong. So there's some good stuff happening around built environment, specifically around smart cities right now, which really y'all should be paying attention to if you're not, because I mean, cities, like I said earlier, a campus is very much like a city, has all the elements of a city. And there's most countries, most cities, not I don't know the number, but the ones we looked at, we in doing the maturity model in cities, which Microsoft covered the cost of that. I mean, they have small programs within their IT department within the city that deals with smart cities initiatives. And just even here in Asheville, in my backyard, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. I had no idea we had a smart city initiative here in the city. So it's a and the conferences, the information coming out in the smart city world is something that universities should be looking at very closely. And we're going to be leaning into it this year, doing some more work around smart cities. We received a couple of small grants to do work around training cities on accessibility, and particularly around procurement, as I mentioned earlier. The other area that we're seeing not a lot of information out there, and this is also very relative to higher education, is around mobile app accessibility. Um, and that is something that there's not a lot of training out there on. Um, and so we are in the process to launch a informal course around mobile accessibility, mobile app accessibility. And we'll probably end up doing maybe a micro credentialing program around it. So all developers that have the web accessibility specialist certification could also go and get the mobile accessibility um, micro credential possibly. So we're playing around that. The the this particular informal course that we're launching will be about 3.5 hours. I wouldn't really call it a course. It's more of a training in a sense. It's going to be focusing on the specifics around mobile apps accessibility. It's going to hit disability and AT, which really ties into the CPAC certification. So there's some crossover there. Accessibility settings within mobile devices, accessibility development gaps, where we're seeing some of the challenges are when developers are developing apps. And then obviously some of the legislation and guidelines, we hit that in every certification we do, as well as training and courses. Um, I mentioned earlier that we have badges. This was something that we really thought hard and long about because we didn't want these knowledge badges to compete with our certification. But again, as I mentioned earlier, that not everyone wants to get a certification for different reasons. It could be the cost. That does cost to get a certification, to maintaining the certification, because they change different careers and so on. So we developed tied to those courses, and I use that lightly, the courses, but the training courses. We 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 have badges, and these are the same badges that are tied to Credly, the digital metadata badge that we provide. So we can give one on social media, we can give one on the document accessibility, and so on. What we're launching this year um, that I'm really excited about is that we have bundled some of the courses. So a lot of these courses the badges that you see up here are tied to the courses. So you take the course, and then you pay $15 to take the exam if you choose to. And the exam, it's not exam, sorry, the test. The certification is an exam. So there's no proctoring involved, whereas the certifications exams are proctored. And we use Pearson VUE as our proctoring external testing um, facility, as well as we use an outside professional testing organization to analyze all our exams. So we don't do that in-house. They keep the database. They tell us who passed and who didn't pass the certifications, that we don't want to touch that, and we keep that outside of our organization. But the badges have been really successful. We've launched them just to kind of the second half of last year to see the intake of that. But we found that a lot of people really like to just have that extra knowledge in a particular area. What we're going to be doing this year is we're going to be taking the digital courses, and if you take each of the courses and you take the test and you pass the test, that aren't proctored, open book in a sense, I guess, you can sit for a proctored digital accessibility exam that would be tied to CPAC. So the certification, the broad certification, the core competencies I mentioned earlier, we're gonna tie a badge to it, so digital accessibility. So you don't have to be a developer, right? Not all of us can sit behind the screen and do code, right? So this will allow you to have the brevity of these different areas and still have some experience and show your knowledge around digital accessibility, which is vital, as we know, in campuses. So there's some exciting stuff that we're doing this year. So just to close it out, I've talked about Princeton a couple of times. There's several other universities. Virginia Tech just has done phenomenal work around using us as a model, but other good practices like CSU I talked about earlier with the procurement program, using some just really looking around and seeing what's working there, and we try to stay on top of all of that as much as we can and share that. But the what Princeton has done, as I've mentioned earlier, that they have developed the CPAC course. that we have not ownership of, but we have it in our LMS, and it prepares people to take the exam. It doesn't You go through the course doesn't mean you're going to pass it, but it does prepare them to go through to take the exam, and they update it and they maintain Princeton being the actual course itself, as well as the test that we provide, a practice test. Um, what they've done is they've rolled this out campus wide. So they have over 210 staff members, and this is they could be at 250, 260 now, easily. They do cohorts every year, and people come in, they take the certification, they do it, they host it at Princeton. People sign up for it, they proctor it at Princeton, and then they get designated this. And it's just been beautiful to watch the campus shift and change. And it's not just Princeton, but a handful of other, like I mentioned, Georgia Tech has done a lot. Virginia Tech has done a lot. Harvard has done a lot in this area. UNC, North Carolina has done a lot in Chapel Hill. So there's some exciting stuff. There's a lot more work that we need to do with universities. I wish I could spend all the time with universities, but it's great. So here is this is the next thing is a responsible AI sharing community resource. And I wanted to bring this up because I saw AI obviously is everywhere. I think I saw it on the agenda here at Enabling at the conference in DC. We have a lot that we have done around AI. In fact, we almost put too much on the agenda, I think, sometimes, but everyone's hungry for it right now. So what we've launched, and we really launched it this year. We piloted, tested it. We launched it kind of soft launch at Enabling in October. Is developing a show page on LinkedIn around responsive AI. And I'll be real transparent about with y'all about, we had 3 or 4 years ago, we had a real tough situation with our association. We had several members that used overlays or developed overlays and selling overlays. And I wouldn't say all of them, but a couple of them, really were basically the companies that were selling them were basically false marketing the tool, saying that it could do things that it couldn't. I can make your website accessible within 24 hours. I can do this, I can do that. I mean, they were competing with each other, so it makes sense. I mean, in some ways, but we got a lot of kickback from our members about, code of conduct standpoint. These people need to be telling the truth about what their tool can and cannot do. And we're not experts in this area. That's not what we do. So we've had to pull together, a committee to look at, what was being said. So this site, this LinkedIn site, is very important because I think, we have to, as AI moves so quickly, and it's so impressive what is the impacts it have for people with disabilities, and particularly just in the cognitive disabilities, how it's impacted me is amazing. I wish I had it when I was in school. In some cases, it's scary, but so we've started this responsible AI sharing community and resources, and it's in collaboration in some ways with the new director of the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation, which is the organization that's changed its name that I started back at Georgia, University of Georgia, and now at Georgia Tech. It's going to cover laws and policies. It's going to cover, AI's impact on disability inclusion, inclusive AI initiatives, co-design. It's going to touch that topic, as well as inclusive AI insurance activities, engagement, and then there's going to be some focus in Canada and some of the work being done, particularly around the rollout of the ASC 6.2. So there's some really good stuff happening. I would recommend you can Google it, and it will pull up, or I can send over the chats. But get in there. We have only about 150 people. The other thing that we have out there right now tied to us is I mentioned the EAA, which is the European Accessibility Act. I mean, what's going on there rolls down to different countries, and watching them is really interesting. So we have a show page on the EAA, which is a question and answer show page also where we post a question and then we answer it a couple days later. And there's a kind of an archive of the Q&A. So there's a lot happening in that, and a lot of information out there. I have talked a lot, so
We do that, right? This is our realm.
it's academia, so I don't feel as bad. So
Well, while because I'm sure there's some persons who want to give comments, may not have questions, but they may want to give comments. And I just want to start it off by saying, you know, I have been very excited about the possibilities from the conference time. And when we speak about building accessibility campus wide, you laid out so many things, and the only things that are bubbling through my mind as we think about how we can do this campus wide through your certification programs, or even, modeling something that VT or Virginia Tech or Princeton or Georgia Tech would have done, is how do we, work towards possibly getting faculty and staff members actually, if not certified, how do we actually give them access to become knowledgeable and get badges? Because clearly training is the answer, exposure is the answer. And once we can expose all persons to the knowledge, and then the belief is they would walk in that manner, and that's how we start from inside out, start to change the campus in that regard. And that's it. I get excited about it because, if we can have students graduating education programs, graduating service related programs in culinary arts or even in business administration, and as they're about to exit the university, they can say, I have a CPAC certification, or they can say, I have a knowledge badge. And I think it will make them so much more marketable within any domain of education. For anyone to say, I have CPAC certification will be a powerful thing, especially if you're a newly graduate. So there's so many possibilities that, I can see happening for the university growing in future just because of access to your organization and information in that regards. And then guess what? The University of the Bahamas is the tertiary institution of the Commonwealth. And we should be the trendsetters. We should be setting the lead. We should be creating the opportunities. We should be the examples for the community to see that disability matters, digital accessibility matters, accessibility within education matters, faculty, staff, no matter what tier of staff you are, everyone matters. Everyone should have access. And I don't see anything more fitting to solidify the fact that we are the trendsetters in this regard than by having faculty, large numbers, staff, large numbers, with either a knowledge badge or certification or something to show that we're serious in this country, the Bahamas, about disability, accessible access to tertiary education through all aspects. So my questions then are, how can someone get a knowledge badge? How can I become a member? How can the university become a member? How can we get access to the DARE index? Because research is powerful, and I would really like to know how we do as a country, report card wise, university wise, with disability inclusion. Because that's important. If you don't know where you are, you can't really say where you're going. But if we have the data, then it's no longer hearsay. We don't have to assume. We don't have to say, oh, we can see what's going on, because we'll be a part of the numbers. And we can really action steps towards inclusive education, inclusive workforce on campus. So those are my questions, and then everyone else, can join in.
yeah, yeah, no, there's a lot there to unpack, but so my thought would be, the easy answer would be, okay, become a member, right? And we have non-membership stuff to get your certification. You don't have to be a member. So we have it, and we do have a student member. So that's the easy answer to some of that. But my 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 thought is that you want a coalition on campus that really buy in to this, right? I mean, you want faculty, you want staff, you want a couple different departments to come together and understand what they're buying into, or if they're going to buy into, how they're going to implement it campus wide. And I think that's what Princeton did so well is and Virginia Tech particularly. Um, they basically said, let's come together. It was housed in one of the departments. Um,
Okay.
but I think that's where you get the buy-ins. You have the ambassadors. We're going to really push this too, and talk about it, right? So that's one piece I would recommend. I mean, if you become an organizational member and and pick the 12 or 24 employees that you want part of this. And then going through an orientation and doing all the things like, how to get the badges, how to do all that. And we can even do that without being a member. But I think the big thing is getting would be where I would start first, and then then move into, that's the discovery phase, and then move into the membership from that standpoint. We are, in addition to that, we have time. You are working with a couple universities right now, only a handful, with doing a student pilot. So we do have membership, um, and we know that the certification's too expensive for students, but we've dropped the certification to $100 for students, which is what all faculty that we've talked to said that needs to be at the minimum. Um, I mean maximum, at least 100. And so we could pull together, working with the university, a pilot where we bring 10 students a year, or 15 students a year. And what we want back to those students is a short video that says why did you do this? Why were you interested in getting certified or taking maybe a knowledge badge? Because that's going to obviously promote the accessibility profession. Um, and it's going to give the students something nice to put on their resume when they do graduate, in addition. Um, so there's all, but we can be really flexible about that. Being a small organization, we have the flexibility to work with our members to try to figure out what's the best way to roll out and be successful with implementing that campus-wide accessibility.
Okay. So I really thank you for sharing that. So I get one comment in the chat. I'm just trying to process it to make sure I get the question correct. So for clarity, the gateway to get the faculty, for example, is, well, I guess the buy-in would be through finding, first of all, the persons who actually want to champion the call. Find those persons first. Yes, Dr. Lee.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we huddle with those.
Yeah. And then pick 12, get 12 people, because that's the bottom level membership. 12 people that are invested in really rolling this out as much as you can throughout the campus. You start there with that membership, and you become a member, an organization. Those faculty, those staff, they get put underneath on a roster underneath the umbrella of the university, and then they have access to the repository of benefits that we have, and they have access to discounts for the certification, and so on.
And you know what? And I think it can work because now I think is a great time to introduce to the persons on the call that our department actually have to form an accessibility committee, a part of our accessibility policy, a part of accreditation. And we do have select persons who are on that committee. And I think we're allowed maybe one or two persons that are outside of the select group of persons. So maybe those persons can start to make up our 12, and we can work in that regard because we're all a part of the accessibility committee. There is another question that says, what if the university becomes a member?
Yeah, I would recommend that, having the organizational membership other than the individual memberships. It could be cheaper to do individual memberships, if you only have 3 or 4 people. But the organization, but it makes a statement. You get a badge, especially with the accessibility committee. They can say, "Hey, we are doing these things. We're moving on the roadmap of being more accessible." So I would highly recommend being an organizational member of, and we have a nonprofit governmental rate for that. And we can have a discussion around that. That could be.
Okay. And with the organizational member, that would mean that every faculty, every staff, that does not include students? No? It's just staff and faculty.
There's different levels of
Okay.
memberships. The top membership for so I think it goes from like 1,600 a year, dollars, US dollars a year for the lowest membership, which is 12 employees, to around 9,000, I believe, a year. And that is unlimited employees.
Okay.
And you can actually put students in it too. Because it doesn't have to be tied to we like it tied to the university's email address because then to the master. It doesn't have to be, but that's the way
Right.
to push it.
Okay. So that's a lot of food for thought. And if you are on the call and you think that the university should consider a university organizational membership, you can give a show of hands, you can give a round of applause just to, get us some feedback because this is the traction, the direction we really want to go in. And if we be honest, and I'm going to be honest, right? I live in the Bahamas, and for me, as a person who suffers with a disability, for me, my experience is the Bahamas is not very friendly. It's not very accessible. Let me say accessible. It's not very accessible to persons with disabilities. And the only way to change that, it starts with each of us trying to find ways to create inclusive spaces for everyone and us learning more about how we can do that and then championing that call for ourselves and our small areas and then spreading the fire, and I think it's going to take each of us, because disabilities can happen to anyone at any time. And unfortunately, people don't realize that until it happens to them. They're riding a bike, they're walking, they're driving, something happens, and all of a sudden, oh, yes, this is a big deal now. But we don't have to wait until that happens because everybody matters and everyone counts. So, is there any other comments, chat? Anyone wants to open up their mic and thank our wonderful guests before I do? Please open up your mic.
Don't be shy.
I know, right? It's like,
So much.
okay.
It's been great being here, and hopefully we can work together in the future and keep doing the good work. I'm so glad y'all are having this event. Thank you.
And
I
so,
just,
go
Thank you,
ahead.
Dr. Lee, so
I
much for this
just want to say
fantastic
thank you.
presentation.
Oh, hold on. Dr.
Yeah.
Bethel and somebody else was talking. I don't know who that's. Dr. Curtis. Go
No,
ahead.
I was saying thank you very much for the information. However, it was very comprehensive, and I really would want to hear it again. So, and in terms of dissecting, all right, and so let's look at doing this again. All right.
Sounds great.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
And she is actually, I consider her to also be one that's under the umbrella of an accessibility specialist, as she, is tied to that area as well. That's Dr. Curtis, um, in many ways. Dr. Bethel?
I was saying thank you, Dr. Lee, so much for the presentation. Fantastic information and fantastic work that your organization is doing. And then I also wanted to say thank you again to Mrs. Lunn. It's really such a privilege to have her here to caption for us, sorry, to sign for us for the meeting. So thanks, everybody.
And with that said, again, harping on Dr. Bethel, I want to first of all say thank you, Mrs. Lunn, for your services. And basically, what we want to do is we wanted to create this experience of true access so that everybody understand when we say true access, this is what we mean. And being the tertiary institution of the country, this is how we set the trend. And this is the move we should be, going through, and we want to make this a practice for us because access, we don't know who's on the call who may utilize the service, but access is important. And to Dr. Lee, oh, I wish I had a free plane ticket to send you, but I'm going to work on that one, I promise you. For the next time we invite you in person, we're going to set you up good, I promise you. You're going to feel the sunshine again, from our side of the world, right? But I want to say thank you for your time, your information, and we will definitely be connecting in smaller meetings because we want to make this happen. We need to make this happen, especially with that DARE index, as the university is a tertiary institution involved in research, and that's at the heart of it. And we would like the Bahamas to be a part of that DARE index so that we can really gauge as a country, figure out where we stand with disabilities and inclusion in that regard. So I hope you don't get tired of me.
No.
But thank you so much. Thank you to your team for making this happen. To faculty members on the call, I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest and your willingness to be an advocate and champion for digital accessibility in your schools and in your spaces. So let's give Dr. Lee another virtual round of applause. And thank you all. We will now break for lunch for today. And when we come back at 1:20, all of you are invited, as we will have